Hello my friends, you're watching Making Look Great number 5. My name is Maltanan, and in this video I will show you how to create this cool gyroscopic element that you can use in your motion graphic projects and compositing. So let's get started. First, we'll analyze what we see here. This is basically a circular shape, and we definitely see a sphere with a bunch of numbers and two rotating elements inside, two rings inside. And we're going to build all the elements inside After Effects using shape layers and effects that are bundled with Adobe After Effects. So let's just start and create a new composition, 400 by 400, that's fine. This is going to be our final comp, so I just call it final. And first of all, we're going to create a sphere. So let's create a new empty solid, and type in CC sphere. And we definitely need to create some kind of a texture for this sphere. Right now it's only using the solid, so it's plain solid color, but we're going to create a texture with numbers, so something like you see in here. So let's just dive in and do that. When you're doing a texture for a sphere, the important thing is that the width is twice as big as the height. So we're going to create this pretty big so it doesn't get distorted or blurred when we put it on the sphere. And we can also shut the transparency grid off and move to full resolution. And we're going to create the text layer right now. And the good thing is to have a monospaced font. So take a look at this. If I'm going to type 200 and 300, you can see that all the letters overlap. So those are monospaced. Characters are basically the same width. So that's pretty important for us. And okay, so let's just go ahead and type numbers. And I want the numbers to be very different visually, from each other. So I'm just going to increment the tens place and the ones place. So like that. And like that. Okay, maybe I should just zoom back a little bit so I can see this better, and maybe move to full screen. And I think that we can go back. So okay, I think that we don't even need the last number because it's going to be looped. We're going to have a loop. So something like this. Okay, we are good to go. So let's just put this texture onto our sphere. So let's just call this composition a texture. And let's hold Alt and drag it onto the layer, and that way we're replacing the original source of the layer. Let's move to full res and scroll down the rotation properties. Well, obviously we have a problem because this is not the way we want the numbers to appear on the sphere. We want them to go vertically. So how can we do that? We actually need to rotate all the numbers 90 degrees. So then we can rotate the sphere like that and have the numbers written horizontally. So let's just go ahead and try and to do that. And actually doing this for each number would be pretty painful. So what we can do is we can use a text animator and choose the rotation parameter and rotate them negative 90 degrees. As you can see, all the letters are now affected, but we want the anchor point group to be set to word, and that way we get exactly what we need. Pretty fast, pretty efficient. So let's just go back to our sphere and see how that looks. Okay, that's much better. Let's just zoom out. Okay, this is looking great so far. But we got another problem. When we rotate the sphere, you can see that the lights, the default sphere lights are affecting the render, and we don't want that. So we have to go to the shading options, turn diffuse down to 0, and diffuse is what makes lights, shadows, and highlights on the renders. So we need to turn the ambient up, and that way it's just flat shaded like that. And that's actually good, but we need to create some borders or labels for those text elements, just like you see in here. So let's just go ahead and do that right now. Go back to texture, and we can use shape layers to do that. So let's just go ahead and select the rounded rectangle tool, and be sure that you've got no layer selected when you're trying to draw shape layers, because if you do, you're only going to create a mask, and this is not what we're interested in. What we want is a shape layer, so make sure you've got no layer selected in here, and that way you will create a new shape layer. We can call it labels, move it down, and that actually looks good, but I want to change the colors, so we do the same thing I did in this video in the rendered file. I just choose nice orange color, just like that. Maybe scale it down a little bit. So go to size. We can actually put round numbers in here. 80 and 40, that's better. And just scale it down a little bit, like so. And now we need to duplicate this shape, so we've got one instance for each number. And we don't have to do this manually. We can go to the add and choose repeater. You don't see it because it's off screen, but it's there. I'm choosing repeater, and simply enough, all I have to do is go to the transform options and play with the position parameter. I'm holding Control, so I do a very slight changes, like a fraction of a pixel, like so. And now I need to create more copies, and actually 20 copies. So let's just go ahead and zoom out and see if we matched it correctly. I think we can adjust this just a little bit. Okay, that looks much better. Okay, so what else do we have here? Okay, so we just need to create those small lines in here, those ticks. And we can also do this using a rectangle, a regular rectangle. So let's just add a rectangle. And we want to change the X dimension to 0, so it's a line. And we want it to be, what, 20 pixels maybe? That looks fine. And we need to offset it here. And as you can see, the repeater already takes action and takes care of duplicating this shape. And we need to create another one. So Ctrl D to duplicate. Go to position and put it in here. Okay, so far so good. I think it's a good place to save the project. And let's go back to the sphere, and whoa, there you go. Very nice. Quick, efficient, good looking. Okay, very nice. So now we'd like those numbers to rotate like that, right? But you'll notice that we have a problem. If I'm going to rotate the sphere just a little bit and then change the X rotation like I did a second ago, it's not going to work the way we want. So what can we do to make it happen? Well, the easiest solution would be animating the texture here, but then we would have to take care of, after moving those two layers, the text layer and the label layer, we would have to take care of that. We want whatever went off frame to put it back in here. So that's a little bit troubling, and we don't want trouble. So let's just find another solution. And another solution is using the offset filter, which we could of course use in the texture composition, but I guess it's much easier to use it in here. And what this does, it actually offsets the image and warps it back. So when I drag the X position, I actually get what I need. Let me just show you how this works when I'm going to rotate the sphere a little bit and go back to the offset. Okay, very cool. So far so good. Great. So let's just set it up to 0 maybe, and reset the position of the sphere. And I think it's time to actually animate the offset position, and we're going to do that using expressions. So let's just alt click on the shift center parameter, and we're going to use a wiggle expression, which you probably know already because it's been mentioned before in previous releases of Making Look Great DVDs. So let's just create a variable and make it wiggle. How much do we want it to wiggle? Let's say 1 time per second, and we want to wiggle this, let's say 360 pixels. I don't know why I chose this number, but I did. Makes sense because it's emulating rotation, so kind of makes sense. And we're putting the 0 in the brackets at the end because wiggle sees that this value is two-dimensional and it's going to give us two-dimensional value, and we want only one value, so we have to choose one of the values that it's providing, so either 0 or 1. And the other parameter should be 300. Whatever happens, it should be 300. Now we're just going to output those two values like that, and let's see how that works. Let's just save the project and see how it works. Okay, looks fine. Looks very good. But how about if we put some motion blur on it? So let's turn it on for the layer and for the comp. And as you can see, nothing happens. We don't get motion blur. And this is because the layer itself and the sphere itself stays in one place. And After Effects calculates motion blur based on the changes on position and rotation and scale and or other transform properties. And we do not transform the sphere in terms of changing position. So we actually need to find another solution. And there is a solution, which is creating a new adjustment layer. Let's call it motion blur. And we put CC force motion blur. And that way, it's going to work for all the elements that we're going to have in our composition. Okay, very good. Let's turn it off for now and make it a shy layer so it doesn't get in the way. And let's create another element. And I wouldn't be myself if I didn't put some expressions to control the overall appearance of this element. So let me just create a new null object and call it controller. And we're going to put a new slider. And the reason I'm doing this is because all the elements that you see in here are in some relation to each other. The biggest element is the sphere, then we've got this outer ring, which is a little bit smaller, and then we've got the inner ring that is even smaller. So, but if I would like to change the size, change the radius of the sphere, I would like the other elements to react to that as well. So this is why we're putting the slider here. Let's call this radius. And let's take our sphere rotation. You know what, maybe I'll just lock this palette for now so it doesn't change as I click here. Let's change the sphere, radius, alt click it and use the pick whip. And that's it, simple as that. Let's set it to 100. Very good, very good. So far so good. We can just close this now. And I think we can start getting ready to putting new elements inside. And one thing to keep in mind is that if you take a closer look at this render, we actually get some parts of the sphere behind all other elements and some part of the sphere is in front, which is totally understandable and it's natural, but it actually doesn't work that way in After Effects if you're just going to put a 3D layer inside. It's all going to be stacked on top of each other, just like the stack of the layers here. So we're just going to fix this problem before it even occurs. So let's just duplicate this sphere. And we're going to match all the parameters of this duplicate with the original sphere. So let's call this numbers front, numbers back. Let's just twirl down the properties. I'll just close this for now so it doesn't get in the way. And twirl down those properties and maximize the window so we can see everything. Okay, obviously we need to match the shift center parameter of the offset, so we're just going to take the pick whip and point it like that. Simple enough. And we're going to do the same thing with all other parameters of our sphere. So with the rotation, even though we didn't change the rotation yet, but we are going to do that later on, so just pick whip all the parameters like that. Along with the radius. Even though the radius is driven from the same Snyder value, I really like to, it's more logical to connect it with the radius of the sphere, because I don't really know what I'm going to do with this radius. Maybe I'm going to multiply it by a number or something like that, and then I would have to multiply it in here as well. And we know that both of those spheres has to be identical, so that's the way to do it. And the only difference between those two is render mode, and we just twirl down the settings for the back sphere and we set the render to inside, and on this sphere we're going to change it to outside, and that way we can put whatever we want in the middle of the two spheres so that it looks the way it should. And I think that we can also do one little thing. I think that we can lock this layer, maybe even make it shy so we only see this one. And let me just rotate this a little bit. I think that we can actually make the back a little bit darker. What do you say about that? Let's just try it. Maybe we should do it with opacity or some other filters, but I actually think that maybe exposure will do just fine. Just put the exposure in and -1. Okay, I guess that's it. And we can log this layer again and hide the shy layers, and let's see how it works. Okay, that's much better. Okay, so the sphere is set up, the numbers are set up, so now finally we can get into the interesting stuff. So using shape layers to create all this amazing graphics in here, and then moving to expressions to make it work. So buckle your seatbelts and let's go. So let's start by creating a new shape layer, and it's going to be a circle. So we take the ellipse tool, and very important thing about shape layers, it's that they're vector based, so it doesn't matter how big you make them at the beginning. You can always scale them up, scale them down, and they always stay sharp. And another thing is that you can actually create shapes that are positioned at a fraction of a pixel. So when you're drawing them and you want the position to be precise, it's best to work with 100% view, because that way there's no way you can start drawing them at a fraction of a pixel. So take a look at the info palette in here, and let's just try to aim it at 200 by 200. Just like that. Okay. Oops. And I didn't listen to my own advice. I had the layer selected, so I'm creating a mask, and that's not what I want. So Let me just make sure I have everything unselected and aim the mouse again. Okay, that's better. Okay, whatever the size, it doesn't matter at this point. And let's call this outer ring. We want to get rid of the fill, so we can just select it and delete it. And I want to change the color. So let's go with a nice color like that. Okay, that's about right. And now let's take advantage of our controller layer. Let's just put it on top. Let's call this outer rings. And let's just log this palette for now. And let's take a look at the path properties. We can see that the size is set to 200 by 200, but that's actually not the radius. That's the whole size of the sphere. So, of the circle, sorry. So 200 is this distance. It's from one side to the other, and we want to be able to control this size based on the radius. So whatever the radius is, this should be multiplied by 2. So when I just take the expression here and create a new value, let's call this radius, and point to the slider like that. And now let's just put radius times 2, radius times 2, or even better, we can put times 2 there, and here just make it radius by radius. Let's see if it works. Okay, so far so good. But we want this to be a little bit smaller than the actual sphere. So to control the offset in size, we're going to create another slider. Let's call this radius offset, and create another variable, radius offset, and point to the radius offset slider like that. And I think we can also multiply it by 2. All the values should be multiplied by 2, right? So it makes sense. And we can make it radius minus radius offset, radius offset. We could of course define the radius offset at the beginning and then just subtract it in here, but you know, whatever works for you. And now let's just set the radius to 20 like that and see if everything else works. Works perfectly. Okay, very good. So let's take another look at the original rendered file, and we can see that we've got basically 2 rings in here. And the good thing is that we don't need to create an additional shape layer. We can all do it on one single shape layer. So this is our outer ring. So we need another duplicate, right? We need an inner ring. So let's just duplicate it, move it down so it makes more sense. Inner ring, and the inner ring is going to be the same size as the outer ring, but then offset it again by the same radius offset. So it's kind of all symmetrical and stuff. Okay, so let's just go ahead and change that. And we can define the new value, which is outer radius, like that, equals to this, and this is 2-dimensional value. This is important. And before that, we're going to actually, well, we can actually copy this line from here to define the offset value, right? Okay, so paste it in, and we're going to subtract radius offset and radius offset like that, and our outer radius should be out radius. Okay, it works. Let's see. Okay, very nice. And the inner circle is getting larger than the outer circle because this value is getting negative. So we're never going to be that far in this slider. So let's just leave it at 20. If we're ever going to need to move this, it will probably like, a fraction of a value. So we don't really have to worry about that. And the only thing that we need to change right now is to change the stroke width. And the outer circles should be a little bit thinner. So let's make it 2. And the inner circle should be thicker, so like 8 or something. Okay, that looks fine. Maybe just do it like that. Okay, 10 should be just fine. Let's make it 10. Okay, very good. So you've got our outer rings set, and I think it's a good place to save the project. And now let's create the inner rings. So the one with the arrow and coggy looking like circle inside. This is going to be a little bit tricky, but we can handle that. Like I said before, the cool thing about shape layers is that they're vector based. So whenever we use transform, they all stay sharp. So actually, to create that inner ring, we can just duplicate this layer that we already have, call it inner rings, and we can just simply scale it down like so, and it will still stay in relation to all those parameters. Ain't that cool? Because we do have the same expressions applied to them, right? But the results of the expressions are all scaled to 73% using transform. So that's very handy. You don't need to retype anything. So that's very good. Okay, I think that we can shut off our other layers and maybe just make this one a little bit bigger, just so that it's easier for us to work with. And the tricky thing here is that we need to create those cogs in here. So we actually need another shape in here, which is a rectangle, of course. And we need to subtract the paths from each other. We need to subtract the circle from the rectangles. So let's just try and do that right now. I think that we can get rid of the stroke so it doesn't get in the way. And we can simply create a new rectangle. And I want to make it twice as long as it is tall. So let's maybe make it 20 by 10. And another cool thing is that, of course, when you log those two parameters, they stay in perfect relation to each other until you reach 0. So right now they stay in relation. When I go down to 0, it goes back to square. But let's just keep it simple. And we should move this up. And actually, the amount that we need to move this is the radius of our inner circle, right? So that's cool. We can just simply go to the size and take this value and divide it by 2. Remember that this is not the radius, this is the actual size. So we need to take whatever the value we want from these two values and divide it by 2. So let's alt-click it, create a new variable. Let's call this radius. And let's pick the first one and divide it by 2. And the position of our rectangle should be 0 on the x-axis and negative radius on the y. Click enter to confirm. Looks great. Now the only thing left to do is to duplicate this rectangle just like we did with the labels for the texture. So simply enough, let's go to the add flyout menu and choose repeater. And the great thing about this is that the anchor point of this whole shape is in the center of the circle, because that's how we started to create this shape. So we're going to use that actually right now, and we can set the offset position to 0 because we do not want to offset the position. We want to offset the rotation. So let's offset it by 20, for example, and let's create 360 divided by 20 copies. So 18 copies. And let's turn on the stroke to see how that looks. Whoa! We can see that it did repeat the shape, but it's not exactly looking right. Okay, that's a little bit better, but we still need to do some fixes. We want to see only what's on the outside of the circle. So to do that, let's just turn the stroke off for now, or maybe we should even just delete it. And we need to put the fill instead. So let's go ahead, choose fill, and change the color to the color of our stroke, because I kind of like that color. It all works out very good. So like that. And okay, we're getting somewhere, right? But it's not actually what we want. Now we need to subtract the paths from each other. So we're going to the add flyout menu and we're adding merge paths operator. And let me just show you how it works. If I'm going to go to subtract or to intersect, we're going to see all those different shapes that we're getting. And the actual result depends on the order in which the shapes are placed, the paths are placed. So actually we need to change the mode to subtract and put the rectangle above, so that we subtract from all the rectangles, we subtract the inner circle. And that's basically it. So, and the last step is to actually draw the circle. So we can duplicate it, move it outside of this group, maybe even put it below, and add a stroke, just like that. Change the color to blue, and that should do the trick. Okay, very good. But you see there is one problem. The stroke also affects the rectangles, and I don't want that. So how we can fix that? We can actually create a group in which we're going to put the circle and the stroke, and that way the stroke affects only the elements inside this group. So this is looking pretty fine. So the last element to complete this inner ring is to create the triangle, if I remember correctly. Yes. So let's just go ahead and do that, and we can also do it on this layer, so we don't need additional layers, which is just great. I hate additional layers. Additional layers is what makes my life a nightmare. So let's just create a triangle, hold shift to constrain the proportions, and get rid of the stroke, change the fill color. So actually we're going to take this orange color that we have in here. So we can just scroll this down, or even click here and copy this number in here, which is the representation of the color. Go back, click on the triangle, let's maybe name it triangle, and click on the fill, paste the color in, click OK, and that's it. That's all that we had to do to build those elements, all those elements. So now we need to put them together and make them animate. So first of all, let's go back and change the scale back to what it was. So it was 75 or something like that, if I remember correctly. Yep, that looks okay. And you know what? Maybe I think that maybe we should make the stroke a little bit bigger on the inner circle in here. Maybe 4. So it's a little bit thicker. Yes, I think I like that better. Okay, never mind. So let's turn those layers into 3D layers like that, and let's just orient them properly. The outer ring should be facing the comp, so we don't need to change that, but we actually need to change the inner ring, and we need to orient it 90 degrees on the x-axis, so like that. So once the layer is rotated, we can start to animate it using expressions, of course, naturally. Expressions are what saves us from using keyframes, and the less keyframes, the better. So let's just type in wiggle, and let's wiggle it like 1 time per second and with an offset of 50 pixels. Well, if you've seen my previous tutorials, you probably know that I'm putting sliders to control every single value that I use in expressions, but just to save us some time and not occupy this palette with additional sliders, I'm just going to type it in manually, just hard code it. If you want, you can change that. You already saw how to do that a second ago. So let's just go ahead and create another expression for the Z rotation. Wiggle. And Z rotation, actually, I want it to go a little bit slower, so maybe 0.5 per second, and also offset it by 50. So you're not actually going to see what's going on right now unless I put a camera in. So maybe let's just go ahead and create a camera. And use the orbit camera tool so we can see what's going on with this inner circle. See, it wiggles to the sides, but it also spins along its axis. So that's actually good. See, take a closer look. It all works. Very cool, very cool. Okay, let's reset the camera for now and maybe even hide it. And I think that covers the animation of the inner ring. And now we have to go to the outer ring. So let's go to the rotation parameters. And we need to make the outer ring move along with the inner ring, but in a different dimension. When the inner ring wiggles to the sides like that, we don't want this outer circle to change, but once it spins, we actually do want it to change the rotation. So we need to pair those rotation values up correctly. And we're going to do that right now. So the parameter to make it spin is Y rotation, and we need to combine this with the Z rotation of the inner ring. So simple alt clicking and pick whipping should do the job. Let's see how that works. Okay, very good. Very good. So far, so good. And another parameter that we need to do is we need to make it bend like this along with the numbers that are rotating. And that's going to be tricky because the numbers are not rotating. They're getting offsetted by the offset parameter. By the shift center parameter of the offset effect, by this value in here. So maybe let me just bring this to full screen and go to outer rings, and we need to create a little bit more complicated expression to handle that. Let's click on the X rotation like that, and let's create a variable that will hold this shift property. So let's call this offset, because that's what it is, right? Offset, pick whip, and point directly to this little value. And now we're going to use a linear expression, which basically takes one value and changes the range in which this value operates. So linear offset, and we need to define in what range this offset changes. And it actually changes, if you remember correctly, from negative 360 to positive 360. So we can just type it in manually and then change this to 0 to 360, because that's the rotation values, right? And that should do the job. Let's just see how that works. Okay, I think we can use the camera right now. Okay, looks fine. Let me just reset the camera again so we don't get, confused. And I guess that covers rotating inner and outer rings, so the only thing left to do is to rotate the sphere itself. And we would like it to be rotating along with those rings, but also along with the camera so that it reacts to the camera. See, when I move the camera right now, the sphere just stays in place, and I would like it to be rotated as well as the camera move. So there is actually a very nice expression to do that. So let me just type it in. Look at this comp active camera position, because when you orbit the camera, you're actually changing the position of the camera. And since the look at expression returns three-dimensional values and we're only interested in one dimension and in x dimension in this case, we have to put 0 in the brackets at the end. And that's basically it. We can copy this expression, paste it in here, change the number to 1 because now we're interested in y rotation, and here do the same thing and put 2 at the end plus 90 degrees because that's the initial value for this sphere like you see in here. I've put it manually at the beginning of this video so that it looks the way we want. Okay, let's see. Okay, now we're getting somewhere. Looks nice. So I think since we've got all those layers set up, we can now unhide our back layer and just organize it a little bit better. So this should stay here and everything else should be behind. Okay. Okay, that looks great. That looks great. Well, there's actually one more thing that we need to do, because the sphere is not rotating to the sides. It's just the numbers are getting offset, but it's not rotating along with the inner circle, and it just kind of feels wrong. So let's just fix this, and it should be very easy. We already have the rotation set up in here. So this is the camera, right? This handles the camera, but we also need to handle the inner circle rotation values. So let me just bring this up to full screen, open up inner rings rotations, and just go ahead and add values from this. And actually, since this layer is rotated 90 degrees, we need to do the same thing we did with the outer rings. So basically we have to bind the y rotation of the sphere to the z rotation of this layer and the z rotation of the sphere to the y rotation of this layer. It's just the way it works. If this is a little bit confusing, then just try it out on your own and you'll see what's going on. It's best to try it out yourself. And let's just add this to this, and it should be fine at this moment. It's a time to make a test render. Okay, are you seeing this? Are you seeing this? Ain't this cool? Okay. Even though it already looks great, we can make it look even better. But just to be safe, let's press Ctrl Save, right? There's a little thing that we can try to do here, and that's actually going back to the texture. And let's just zoom in for a second in here. And let's create a new solid layer that is going to be the color of that nice bluish color that we had in that composition, in that previous composition. And I just put it here, take the rectangle tool and draw a mask just like that through the middle. Go to the feathering options and feather it on the y-axis. Maybe 50 pixels? No, more, definitely more. This will make the sphere look more like a sphere, because you're going to have like a fake shading going on. And I know we could have done it using the regular shading that we have in the plugin options, right, in the CC Sphere, the ones that we changed at the beginning, but the reason we changed them is still the same, so we don't want to use that, and we can actually use solid layers to do that. And I think we can make this one a little bit bigger, generally just feather it out a little bit more. And maybe drop the opacity down to 50 or something like that. And this one we can drop down to maybe 50 as well. You just have to see for yourself what you find fit. And okay, that's looking really nice. But I think I'd like this to be a little bit more intense, so let's make it 100. And on this layer I think we can take the mask and just expand the mask itself. We could use the expand parameter as well as doing this manually, but like I said, whatever you find fit, whatever you think it's okay. Okay, I think that should do it. Okay, looking great. So the only thing left to do is to turn on our motion blur and then just render it out and enjoy this great looking design element ready to be used and reused in your motion graphics projects. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial and see you in the next one. Happy After Effecting!